So coming up in August later this year is going to be Contender Series for 2024, and of course a few days ago I made a video talking about everyone that I knew was going to be on the show, and there wasn't like 6 fighters. Now there are 24 fighters, and that video has already become heavily outdated in only about 6 days, so of course I wanted to make a updated video talking about 24 of the 100 fighters that will be on the show. But of course before doing that, I did want to give credit where credit is due, because Random Knowledge has composed the list that I will be going off, and La Mayonnaise is the guy that seems to be the source for everything right now on the regional scene. So I did want to give credit where credit is due, and now we can get into the fight. Starting off with the middleweight. The first middleweight that we do know is going to be on the show is Mansour Abdul-Malik, a former LFA guy. There's a lot of LFA guys on here. Seemed to fight a bunch of guys in the regional scene. Finished everybody in the first round. Took on a guy in the LFA that was also undefeated at 1-0. Now he's going to probably have to take up a pretty decent step up in competition. Seems to be a pretty good prospect. And I will be honest, a guy that I wasn't super familiar with, and neither I was with Liam Anderson. Kind of the same sort of story, been dominating the regional scene, and then of course, what did he do? Had a bit of a run in the LFA, like a lot of these guys did. A loss to Miles Lee ain't too bad, as Miles Lee is a pretty decent fighter, even though he hasn't fought in ages. But he did fight Donovan Beard and had a pretty decent fight against Donovan Beard and beat Sirikis Dumas on the amateur scene. Aside from that, went on a run, beating some experienced opponents, beating another prospect. He's on the Contender Series, and so is Mateo Tuclos, who is 6-2, middleweight from France. And I do want to say it does seem like the UFC is going to be going to Europe a lot with this Contender Series, especially kind of based on the lineup that we do have right now. Knockout artist, knocking everybody out silly. Has fought for Bellator once, probably in one of the Bellator Europe shows, and then went on a run, knocking everyone out silly, beating a couple experienced opponents on the regional scene over in France, and he's going to be getting his shot. We already knew about Jordan Santos and Will Curry. These two will actually be fighting against each other. Jordan Santos is a guy from Brazil, of course, and Curry is a very well-known English prospect from Cage Warriors, and he's had a lot of success recently after he did lose to Mick Stanton. Has gone out there and beaten a bunch of experienced guys, including former Contender Series fighter Leon Aliou, and he did manage to defeat him. Wes Schultz is a middleweight that is coming off a pretty decent win. He did beat a 4-2 opponent by first round TKO once again in the LFA. Once lost to Dylan Budka, but Dylan Budka is now in the UFC, and that fight could end up not aging too poorly for him. He's gone on a good run in the LFA, like pretty much everyone on the list has done. Dominic Humberger, as I said, going back to Europe. We've got a Czech Republic guy, once again, knocking everybody out silly. And what's so interesting about him is he actually had a contract with the KSW at some point, which is a massive promotion, I believe mostly based in Poland. But now he is going to be fighting for a UFC contract after coming off a loss relatively recently. Bounced back against a good opponent. It'll be interesting to see if that KSW experience can pay off. Another fighter, I guess, from Europe, I guess, is the Russian fighter Andrei Pulayev, who has been getting wins recently in the Russian regional scene, especially on the Shlemenko FC cards, which is Alexander Shlemenko's promotion, as you can put 2 and 2 together. Just defeated a Oliveira, who has got like 60 professional fights in a minute. That's cool. Lon'er Kavanagh. Talk about a couple of flyweights. Lon'er Kavanagh is going to be fighting Antoine Ho, who I did talk about in the last video. 2 of the better flyweight prospects in the world, honestly, Lon'er Kavanagh and Antoine Ho. My prediction for this fight, I do like Kavanagh to win. I think he is just the much better striker, and Antoine Ho I do think is just a little bit green, but there's no better way to prove yourself as UFC ready than the Contender Series, so this is going to be an absolute banger. Jack Duffy will also be fighting against Mitch Raposo. You may know Mitch Raposo from the Contender Series 2022, I think it was, not last year, 2021, a long time ago. Anyway, Raposo, he's coming back from a few years ago. He was also on the Ultimate Fighter that year. Jack Duffy, 7-0, flyweight, had a lot of success once again on the regional scene for Uriah Faber's show, which is where Peyton Talbot come from, and Peyton Talbot is an absolute superstar right now. We'll see what can happen there. I do like Raposo's wrestling in the fight, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I've got another fight for you guys. This one is not confirmed, but it seems to be the idea. Rose Conceicao taking on Fatima Klein, and if you guys don't know who Fatima Klein is, she's probably the best MMA prospect right now, and that does include men's and women's. Of course, you could mention like Austin Bashi and other guys, but the point is, Fatima Klein is definitely one of the better prospects in MMA right now, men's and women's. Massive grappling career. Had her first fight, I think, when she was like 19 years old or something like that. Maybe younger. She might have been like 18. 19 years old, just turned 19 when she had her first amateur fight. Has gone pro since then, has dominated everyone, looked very, very good. Word on the street seems to be she's fighting Rose Conceição, who is the LFA champion. Who would have guessed it? 7-0 for Conceição. Had a pretty decent fight recently against Elaine Lopez prior to that. Had beaten decent fighters, but so-and-so competition up and down. He's 6-2, but debuting girls is what it is. Fatima Klein, though, as I said, she is a very, very good prospect. Shannon Clark is a flyweight from Canada who will be on the show. She is 5-0. Just got her own big win over Thani Lopez on guest or what on show. And guest on what show? LFA. The UFC loves the LFA. She has not got a guaranteed fight, but another flyweight that is definitely going to be on the show is Eunice Dubin, and this is going to be a very, very interesting tape study for me because she has never fought anyone with a professional fight in her professional career. Interested. I know I can find tape on her though, as FFC tape is pretty easy to find, and 300 Sparta tape is out there on YouTube, so it'll be interesting, but like, who really knows, honestly? Who really knows? Now we've got Claudia Sogula, who's from Poland. Once again, another European fighter. 6-1 record. Does have experience over not the best opponents, but her one loss to Karolina Sobek, I guess, isn't too bad because Karolina Sobek is in the PFL right now, but on a bit of a losing streak. And it's funny because I definitely have actually watched this fight because I remember doing tape study for Karolina Sobek's PFL debut. Akaro Brito is a featherweight that the UFC seems to really, really want on the show because they actually cancelled his, you guessed it, LFA fight last weekend at the time of me recording this video, so he could guarantee to be on the show, like in case he got injured or lost or whatever. Seems to be a KO artist. Haven't really seen too many of his fights, I will be honest. I was looking forward to watching him on the LFA show, but they pulled him from the fight so he can be on Dana White's Contender Series, which does make a lot of sense. Also on the show is Michael Imperato, and if you guys may or may not know, he actually was signed to the UFC 10 years ago and probably doesn't want this information to resurface, but he did lose his UFC contract a few years ago because he was spotted in a documentary saying racial slurs. He was actually booked to fight Aljamain Sterling at one point. I don't know if it's on Tapology. He was meant to debut against Aljamain Sterling, honestly, about 10 years ago, but the UFC probably saw that documentary and thought, you know what, maybe not. But what he did do is he did beat Ricky Bandejas in front of Dana White because Dana White was at this event, and he apparently was a plus 900 underdog, and if I knew about those odds, I would have jumped on it because I've never seen anyone more washed than Ricky Bandejas. I love Ricky Bandejas. I kind of hoped he was going to get into the UFC after Bellator cut him, but it is what it is. If you watch his fight against Francisco Rivera Jr., he is lucky that was no contest because he was losing to Francisco Rivera Jr. If you know, you know. That was not a good look. Imperato gets another opportunity in the UFC, but he probably will just be used to build up someone else, I'll be honest. Decent grappler, probably not a decent person, but we'll move on. Cody Steele, 6-0. Welterweight, I think lightweight actually, you might be fine at lightweight, but he was actually guaranteed to be on the show when he was 5-0. But he still took this fight against Alejandro Martinez anyway. Got a pretty decent win there. I think the knockout went relatively viral on Twitter. A few people were kind of talking about it. And as I said before, he actually had the contract when he was 5-0, but he still took this fight anyway. His best opponent of his career, so it was good to see him take on a decent opponent with a lot of experience. Now we have Pat Pitlick, who was 9-1. Once again, was on that Canadian show. Knocked out his opponent, Ryan Leininger, in just over 90 seconds. Very, very good opportunity for him to go out there and do that. 9-0, 9 knockouts. I mean, he's definitely a Dana White's Contender Series guy, but he's 35, so he's probably going to have to get a finish if he wants a contract. Once again, going back to Europe, Mikhail Niani, I apologize for that one, is 13-2. And what does he like to do? He likes to knock people out. I mean, you've seen a theme here. LFA and knockout artists. That's what the Contender Series wants, and that's what you get in here. He did lose to Murtaza Talha, who is probably one of the better prospects again, who lost to Bellato. No, Murtaza, how did this happen? Anyway, aside from that, he another funny thing is as well, I definitely have seen this fight because of course I was doing tape study for Murtaza Talha. But since then, knocking people out silly. 4-second KO against the guy that was 0-1, but 4-second KO? Come on now. Bruno Lopez is going to get another opportunity, which I'm glad for, because once again, he's one of the better prospects in this weight class, and he just fought like an idiot against Ribeiro, man. Just did not fight smart whatsoever. Got slept, embarrassed me, embarrassed himself. Minus 1200 favorite, by the way. On a 600 favorite. I'm pretty sure it's minus 1200 at one point anyway. Anyway, let's move on to the only heavyweight, which there should be more because it seems like the UFC is building up a lot of middleweights. They're probably going to want a lot of guys from light heavyweight and heavyweight. We only have Hugo Canha that we know about at the moment. But this guy, national wrestling champion in Brazil, very good wrestler. Very good competition beaten as well. He did fight at one championship at one point. But aside from that, beat an 11-7 opponent. Beat the former Dana White's Contender Series 2-time fighter Eduardo Neves. I like him as a prospect. Because he's so good, honestly, there's probably a very good chance that he's actually going to win in the fight that he fights. But that's it. That's all I know. Let me know what you think in the comments below.